everybody. Welcome back to Community Spotlight. My name is Dan. I am the director of the NorCal Cosplay Ball. And joining me tonight is a fellow community organizer. Say hello to Cayce.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, so how are you doing? Has the quarantine been treating you well?
Not really, but it's not really treating anybody well.
Yeah. Well, as long as you're staying healthy and whatnot, that's the least we can ask for. So, for those of you guys that don't know, Cayce is an organizer of a one-day event that we hold in the Bay Area called Yume Con. So, um, before we get into that, Cayce, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I actually just turned 24, and I'm a sociology student. I've been in the cosplay community for a while. I started going to cons, I guess it would have been 8 years ago, because I started going even closer to like 9 years. And I started running my own convention a little while back after I took it over from someone else, and I am now seeming to be more frequently known as the guy who runs gaming parties. So that's been kind of a cool identity. Everybody seems to know about those. So we'll probably talk more about those a little down the line.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely wear a lot of hats in this community. Besides having an event and hosting events, you also do a lot of photography. You do some cosplay yourself. I think you mentioned you even kind of dabbled in art for a little bit. Yeah? Like, as someone that's currently doing all of those and also a student, do you ever find that it's difficult to juggle all those things? Like, I know myself, there was a point in my career when I was trying to get into my professional career as well as finish school. I almost had to kind of put, anime and video games on the back burner for a little bit. Like, tell us a little bit about your experience there.
Oh yeah, it's damn near impossible. I find myself like putting down and picking up hobbies really often. So I'll like put down photography, pick up drawing, put down drawing, pick up cosplay, put down cosplay, pick up fighting games or whatever, because like my main kind of entry was in through fighting games. And so I don't know, I find myself like switching out more often. I don't actually like watch as much anime as I think a lot of the other people in the community do. I find myself not having a lot of time because I spend more time interacting with the community than actually like watching and enjoying the thing that it's about, which is a little strange, but I've grown to love the community a lot. So it hasn't been too bad.
You can almost think of it as like, being a part of this community. Does it, in a way, help you from burning out from other aspects like work, academics? Do you feel like it's a vital part of your life?
Oh yeah, it's really important. I feel like having, constant events to go to, it's really frequent. It's pretty easy to just go somewhere and just go interact with people who are somewhat like-minded and enjoy the same things almost all year round. I mean, obviously not right now, but since that's been such like a consistent and nice thing to have, I think that's been really important to my life. I'll burn out from work over the course of a week. And then, by the weekend, I can go and just enjoy being out with a bunch of people. I'm definitely more of an extrovert, so I like getting a chance to go out on my weekends and interact with like as many people as possible. So it's really nice to be there.
Awesome, awesome. You mentioned you took over from someone else for Yume Con. So how long has Yume Con been going on for?
Um, so Yume Con has been going on, I believe, since 2015. I think the Facebook events go back to 2016, but there was one before that. And it was started by a few of my friends over at Foothill College. And it was run by a guy named Edmund. He's from Malaysia, and he had actually opened his own convention back when he lived in Malaysia, apparently. So he was able to kind of guide the process, and we had a couple like really strong business-minded people there. So that was really cool. And I joined on the third year, no, the second year. The second year I joined, as their game room person. And it was because they didn't have a game room at all. So I ran a lot of tournaments and had a lot of equipment and knowledge of how to get more equipment and like, create and set up an arcade and do tournaments and all that. So I just kind of like said, hey, do you guys need someone to run your game room? And they're like, oh yeah, sure, why not? And I was like, awesome. So I just kind of did it, and it turned out really well, and it just kind of escalated over the next couple of years, which would have been 2016, 2017, and then 2018 is when I took over the whole convention. So even then, I still played a pretty integral role in like planning and developing the games department.
Okay. What would you say makes Yume Con unique compared to some of the other events? Because we also have Kinyobi Con. We used to have Campbell Con. So, like, there are other one-day events. Like, what would you say makes Yume Con particularly special? Because those are also great events. Like, what would you say makes yours a standout?
So I love small cons, and there's a lot of things that come with small cons that we already have, which is just being more tight knit and being more focused on just interacting with the people who are around. But one thing that makes us a little more unique is that we have a lot of bigger con activities. So we have things like a maid cafe, and we have like a really large amount of artists, and we have lots of performances back to back, and we have full panel lineups. So it's almost like we have a full, like, large size convention lineup, but for a smaller audience. Um, and we have like so much new stuff in the works, especially because I have such like a fully developed staff right now. I was able to take a year off and develop my staff first and foremost, which allows us to have a lot of like a lot of development for each department individually, which has been a really nice change this year, especially.
That's awesome. Yeah, one of the things I like about the one day cons, not necessarily on a personal level, but one of the things that I really appreciate in events is when they're very accessible. So I imagine having a one day event also makes it accessible in the sense that it's a lower time commitment for attendees, probably lower cost of entry. Um, would you almost kind of say, because you go to a lot of the events, would you almost kind of say that you get a different audience at the one day events versus at the full weekend events?
Yeah, so one of the things that I really enjoy about small cons is you'll get like a lot of separation between groups. So like at a big con, you'll have lots of kind of cliques or groups who hang out with each other, and they'll be, separated within that large event. And they'll kind of mishmash sometimes, but since there's so many people in each individual respective group, they mostly interact with their own group throughout the course of the event. I like small cons because small cons will actually have a lot of people from different kind of groups and different social circles. And because there's less of each of those people, like maybe one or two from each social circle, they'll get to merge more. So I've met the most variety of people at these smaller cons because it's just set up to allow that to happen, because not everybody goes out to it and not everybody from a single social circle goes out to it. So everybody's kind of forced to cross socialize in a way. And I really appreciate that. And I loved meeting people from just all kinds of different social circles that I had never like interacted with and wouldn't have interacted with at a bigger convention.
That's awesome. So besides cons, we also have like the gatherings. We have specialty events. Are there any local to the NorCal cosplay community that I guess you would say are your favorites, or at least stand out in particular?
Um, so I mean, my personal favorite is like pretty simple, and right now it's a sore subject. It's Fanime. That event brought me into the community, and it just kind of has a little bit of everything. It's got, I brought came in through gaming and fighting games, and it's got all that, and it's got, just this great environment and just great people and like just great growth and just so much to do. And I've loved it since it's been happening. But recently, I've like really come to appreciate smaller events. So I've really appreciated going out to CanubiCon. I think CanubiCon 2019 was my favorite event of the year. And I think the cosplay ball, which Dan hosts, is
Oh,
also pretty awesome. I got to talk about it just because it's, Dan does it. And I think it's a really cool event because it's
oh,
so
thank you.
focused. It's such a hyper focused event and it's really, really good at what it does. And it really like forces people into like a place that they need to be a little bit outside of their comfort zone while they're still comfortable, and it does it in the best way possible. And I really appreciate events that are so unique and specialized.
Well, that's definitely what the ball is about. We are trying to get people to come out of their comfort zone. The cosplay definitely helps them feel less inhibited. And I really love bringing people together in general. Like so many, like in the last 2.5 years of running the event, I've seen so many people come together, like so many relationships, so many friends, so many new friendships, and it's we also learn how to relate to one another, empathize with one another. So that's definitely awesome. King Yobi Con, I definitely loved it a lot as well. I think Josh and his team do a great job with that. Um, you mentioned 2019. Of course, I'm a little biased towards 2019 since that's when we got to do our talk about bringing people together and how dance is a form of expression that also encourages empathy. So, I definitely like what you were talking about, the whole getting people or facilitating the cross pollination or cross, like the mixing of um, different cliques and groups, because like we even if people don't necessarily stick with those people all the time, there's something to be learned from everybody that you meet. And I definitely love when people, like especially organizers like yourself, encourage that idea. um like I mentioned earlier, you're involved with, like, you wear so many hats, you're involved with so many facets of this community. You do photography, gaming, cosplaying yourself. And, I imagine that having a foot in all of those circles makes it easier for you to get people to mix. And you don't really have to answer this full on, but do you have an aspect that's your favorite? Like, do you like? I don't want to say like, do you favor one more, but is there one that gets you more excited? Like, if you're an attendee, like, what do you look most forward to?
Um, so I think like like saying what my favorite part is a little easier than you might think. I started out kind of going to things because I wanted to go play fighting games, and that was cool. But I've definitely evolved a lot from that. So my favorite part of the community, and the reason I wear so many hats and go into so many parts, is because it's for me, it's just about the people. So I think my absolute all-time favorite part about this community is meeting new people, interacting with people I don't interact with outside of the community. Um, just going to see what people like to do because there's just creative expression in every realm. There's people who love music and they create amazing music for this community. There's people who love art and they get chances to express themselves. There's dancers like you who are, out there making cool anime related dances. And that's, just awesome to see so many forms of creativity. I've really grown to love photography and I get to have a creative outlet there. And so I just feel like there's so many different people and it's just such a good way for me to just go interact with so many different people and learn from all these, different skill sets that I wouldn't normally interact with. And I don't know, that's just something I really love. And I love bringing people together and I love seeing, you know, how people work well together. Sometimes they don't, but a lot of times you get such great outcomes by bringing people together.
I see. You mentioned people, and of course, when you have groups of people, sometimes we end up with, disagreements, drama, and I mean, neither of us are going to lie and say there's no drama in the anime or cosplay communities. Even the NorCal one. So I guess, would you consider that one of the, like, I guess if you put in words, like a deal breaker in this community for some people? Like, do you ever consider it one of the more prominent negative aspects? Is like, let's kind of go into this topic. Like, what are aspects that, because we talk so much about what's great, what are aspects that you think need to change?
Um, well, any community does have like problems and drama. That's definitely a factor. It doesn't really matter what community it is. I've cycled through communities over the course of my, I guess, somewhat short life. And there's always something, but I definitely see that there's a lot of like young people problems in the cosplay community because it is a young community. One that's become particularly relevant that I really think we need to see change because I think it's difficult and it's almost toxic sometimes. And I see this like kind of call out culture really making its way into the cosplay community, and it gets very frustrating to see it. I think sometimes it's called for sure, especially when we're talking about stuff like assault. I think there's room for, that sort of, you know, character attacks because, some people do deserve it. But I've seen a lot of it on very small things and very simple things that just kind of boil down to comfort zones and opinions. And when we see stuff like that, we're looking at a very, very um, simple approach to a very complex problem. Sometimes people just need help understanding what's right or wrong, or what's like appropriate or not appropriate, in a more like nuanced sense. Again, I'm not talking about super serious stuff. I'm talking about just like very basic things like disagreements or, opinion based stuff. We shouldn't be alienating people or putting people on blast for what I would consider to be essentially no reason, because that's just not great. And this community really boasts itself on being a very judgment-free zone, and I think that's kind of just this one of the strongest form of judgments is alienating people because they're different or don't understand like social habits very well.
Hmm. Yeah, especially with a community like this where, um, for whatever reasons that you and I might not necessarily be able to explain, but we do tend to get a large influx of people that are socially anxious or, possibly neurosensitive. So, um, I guess what you're kind of saying is that there are a lot of instances where it's not even intended aggression, but more just like a misunderstanding or not being able to perceive things from the other person's side. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think that that happens sometimes because people aren't able to step outside of themselves as easily.
It's like we can sometimes people will jump to conclusions. We are, like you said, quick to judge. We're quick to come to our own conclusions. It's tricky. It's definitely a very delicate subject. Um, Speaking for myself personally, I know when people come to our events and they walk through our doors, we try to accept people for who they are. We don't want to judge. We don't want people to feel like they need to fit a certain mold. And I definitely appreciate when organizers are very mindful of this because, we could never really we will there's no way of telling what someone's backstory is as soon as they walk in. And and sometimes they may end up offending us, sometimes just because like we may never ever truly get an explanation. And I guess one of the things that I would say is we could look for better communication within our within this community. Like a lot of these problems, instead of immediately resorting to fighting or calling each other out, sometimes I feel like we could just talk to each other. Do you kind of find that something doesn't happen often enough?
Yeah, I feel like sometimes people need to just sit down and talk it out. Other times, I feel like people need to just distance themselves from each other instead of making a call out post or attacking a person publicly or privately. Sometimes you just need to be like, this person's not worth my time. Move on. And, if there really is a problem with that person, someone will give them the time and talk to them. I've sat down and talked to people. And I have behaviors that some people don't like, we all do. And I've had good friends who will be like, hey, you're stupid. Don't say that. And I'll be like, you know what? You're right. And it really just took someone kindly telling me that. And, I've been on the opposite end too and just been like, hey, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and here's why it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and you should maybe rethink the way that you're approaching the situation. And usually people are open to at least listening, and even if they don't change right away, you can get some sort of like gradual change or at least some sort of understanding. And it doesn't always need to be the person that the conflict is with. It could be anybody. It just we need to look at no judgment as also not only just not like judging most people. We need to look at it as, hey, we need to like understand everybody and what might be driving behaviors that we don't like.
Hmm. So I guess a lot of conflicts, a lot of the minor conflicts, we could easily solve. I mean, I say easy. I guess a better word is it's more straightforward than we think. Just being more open-minded and learning to communicate a little better. Like again, um, going back to say like the cosplay ball for instance, one of the things I love about partner dancing is that, well, that that's the word, partner dancing. You have to be good at understanding the scenario from the other person's shoes. You have to be able to understand that it's not just about my own perspective, it's also about how my actions affect somebody from their perspective. So it's about improving communication, and through that I find that when people have these better communication skills, they end up becoming more confident and comfortable because they're more aware. I think that's, tell me if you agree with this. Like sometimes a lot of people feel very anxious in not just this community, but communities in general, because at the back of their head, there's somewhat of an insecurity of like, oh, like people think I'm weird, people think this, people are judging me. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I get it too. I mean, I'll be like, people hate me. And like, I won't always, have like some sort of immediate reassurance for it. And, ultimately, I'm usually wrong. But it's definitely like an anxiety that I can't control. And I understand that a lot of people share this, especially within the community. I see it constantly. And I think it's something people need to be aware of because, some people might not get it. Some people might not feel that way all the time, but it's definitely something that's good to be aware of, whether you feel it or not, is other people feel it. I have to sit down and be like, hey, I feel shitty about myself sometimes, but so do other people. Other people might feel the same way and be insecure, and that's why they, might act a certain way. And if I once I learn to like accept that, I can, I find that I interact better with people, and I feel better about myself too when I am aware of those problems.
Makes sense. And then by having that awareness, it helps us to, or at least not necessarily awareness, but having the mindset that there are a lot of things going on besides what you're experiencing. It allows us to, I guess if I'm putting this, if I'm summarizing correctly, it prevents us from being so dismissive of other people's perspectives and feelings. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
cool.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it.
So, let's talk a little bit about your gaming parties before we finish up. So, you mentioned earlier you like bringing people together. Um, do you view these parties similarly or differently from how you view running Yume Con?
Yeah, so my initial thoughts with my parties, I kind of just started them like years and years ago. I started doing like barbecues at my dad's house back when this is like when I lived in an apartment, so I didn't have like a house to do it at. And over time, I started developing more events, and I started thinking about it more like an event. And I said, what do I want to get from these? Because more people are starting to show up. What do I want to get from these? And ultimately, what I decided was I want other people to come and enjoy a judgment free zone. that is comfortable, and I don't love the, kind of stigma behind saying safe space, but that's really what it is. I try to create this space for people to enjoy themselves the way they are. And, if there are any conflicts, which does happen, I do my best to resolve things so everybody can still enjoy the experience. I'm very, very against the idea of like quickly banning people from the event or saying, no, you can't come. I try to work out the best solution, and that's just because I want to create this space that everybody can just enjoy and play video games. It really keeps in mind the variance of mindsets, and it really keeps in mind the people with social anxiety and the people with spectrum disorders. I think that's really important to me. Um, so I'm a pretty big advocate for keeping in mind that sort of stuff. So I created this environment where people can like, go to a party, but they don't necessarily have to be like partying, if that makes sense. Like you can go sit down, play Smash Bros, play video games, whatever you want to do. Or you can go socialize. Most parties, it's either you gotta socialize, you gotta drink, you gotta party. That's not what it's all about. It's more about just having a space where you can socialize if you feel comfortable, you can talk to people if you feel comfortable, you can do, things that make you feel comfortable within that space that I've set up. Um, and some people who might not normally go out to parties, like I've gotten this a lot, which makes me feel like I succeeded. I get told a lot, yeah, you've created a space where I can come and enjoy a party like never before. Because no one, like, not a lot of these people that tell me this, they don't go out to parties, but they come to my parties because they're set up specifically with them in mind.
Makes sense. We're almost out of time. I guess kind of following up on that, compared to a con where you're inviting people to a public space, do you find that there's ever any issues with the fact that you're inviting people to your home, your place of retreat, like like not even less like we're not even talking about like roommates, but just like you yourself. Do you ever find that people act differently because of that? Do they let their guard down differently? Do they respect the space differently than they would a public venue?
So my house is essentially set up as a party house, so it kind of acts a little more like a public space when things are happening at it. But we haven't really had any problems, and people act really, really kindly to the space. I really can't even cite any instances of anyone like stealing anything. It's actually pretty great or how much people respect the space that I've set up. Like people spill food, but that's just reality when you have food. And it's like, that's the worst it's gotten as far as like space problems. That's pretty good. And again, there's hiccups, but nothing to write home about, which is really awesome. I think, I like to give people a lot of credit, and I think they have not disappointed me at all. People have done a very good job.
Awesome. Well, that's all we have time for tonight. So, we really hope that we can start gathering in person soon. I definitely want to look forward to the next event we're able to have, like especially with so many cancellations. So, let's hope for the best. But once again, thank you so much for appearing on our show tonight. Thanks so much for everything you do for the community. And, I wish you all the best. Stay healthy, stay happy, and again, looking forward to seeing you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great interview.
Awesome. Bye bye.